All right, I think I'm back now. Sorry about that. Let me know if you guys, see if my chat comes back. It's got some hiccup there in the stream hiccups. And now we've got chat hiccups. The chat is gone. Let's see, let me see if I can fix this chat quick. It done disappeared. All right, we're running radio silent. So we'll finish this out. My chat has now not reconnected yet, and it's not looking happy at the moment. So I think, oh, here we go. All right, I think I'm back. We had some internet issues, it appears. So I have no clue how long ago I lost you guys. So here I have the model here, and I've just been using the ZBrush to extrude some different portions out of it. With it, I now have like this very harsh form, and so what I want to do is I want to come through and soften these up a little bit. And to do this, I'm going to use Dynamic. So I'm going to go to the Tool Palettes, I'm going to go to the Geometry area, and I'm going to activate Dynamic. Now you'll notice by default that when I turn Dynamic on, this is going to be looking at my model and seeing it as a subdivision mesh. So it's going to take all the edges and start to give me a preview of what it would look like if it was subdivided. And you can see it's coming out very, very soft. I'm missing all those kind of hard edges, and it just looks kind of like lumpy. So what I want to do is in the geometry over here, there's this option called QGrid under Dynamic Subdivision. And this is going to allow me to do this kind of like edge bumping along the edges there. So I'm going to go to the QGrid, and I'm just going to turn this up a little bit to say 1 or 2. And you're going to see now I'm going to start getting some of these harsh shapes back in my mesh. And then I come down here and change the coverage, and this is going to allow me to get a little bit more interesting kind of bevels on the surface there. You can change these to chamfers, you can turn it from constant to unconstant. So you can just come through and start changing the sliders and just start seeing how this is going to look. Now with the QGrid, you will notice that it's going to work awesome for anything that's got this nice harsh edges. But the front of my robot here has this smooth surface like this, and so you can see it's going to come through and QGrid every single one of those edges. So all this area through here is now getting applied with that QGrid, and it's now going to look a little bit facetted, right? So I don't really want this to happen, so I'm going to disable QGrid on this, and instead I'm going to apply some creasing. So I'm going to go crease, and I'm going to set my crease tolerance to 45, and then crease, and that is now going to apply some creasing to my model now. And so now I'm getting this happening. So a little bit different result to that. Change my polyframes here and turn back to say Matcap Gray. Now here I can change my subdivision slider and also my crease level, and this will determine how much kind of smoothing is going to happen. So I can turn this down to like say a low crease level, and now I'm going to get a little bit of beveling around those edges. So now I have these areas which are giving me a little bit beveling, and then this area is also smooth, and then on these areas through here I can come through and apply some creasing too. And strengthen those a little bit, and then when I apply that dynamic, see now it's going to hold that edge a little bit more. So you have a lot of power with using creasing to kind of describe different forms. It's also really handy for smoothing out different surfaces. So this area through here, I can come through and uncrease, and now it's going to round that, right? So now I have that as a round surface instead of a square surface. I can remove these two. And so just the simple thing of removing creases is going to change the model's design too. So the QGrid, and so John's asking about using QGrid and smooth subdivision levels. So they work in tangent. So if I turn off my subdivisions levels, my smooth subdivision, and just use QGrid, you see it's going to apply that QGrid effect, but it's not going to smooth anything. So it's going to give me some of these areas that are going to be harsh, right? Because the QGrid is still going to come through and add some edges, but the smooth is just going to come in and smooth them out. So this area right here is a pretty good example. So this area right here. So this is with just QGrid. So no smooth subdivisions, and I can turn this up. You can see it's getting finer or closer, but I'm still getting that little edge right there. But then if I start using the smooth subdivisions, you can see how it's going to smooth that out. So you see now I'm getting that kind of softer transition through the area there. So it's really a combination of the QGrid, the coverage, and the smooth subdivisions all at the same time. The flat subdivision is going to also come into play as well, and this is going to work kind of like this crease level was doing down here. And so this is going to end up changing that some too. So just modifying these sliders, you're going to see the result you're going to get. So it's really just up to you what you want it to look like. If you like how it's looking one way, then just keep the sliders that way. If you like it another way, keep the sliders the other way. The smooth subdivision by itself is just going to smooth. But the QGrid, you kind of come through and just play with them all. And you'll see it change on the fly. But in general, for using QGrid, what I recommend is using anything that's got round edges, like cylinder edges like this whole shape here. I'd probably, most of the time keep this as its own subtool that would only use smooth subdivision. And then with these harsher kind of squarish shapes, I'd keep those as another subtool that would only be using QGrid. So splitting them up through it. Yep, and you can also apply the QGrid without smoothing and clean up as well. Yep. So there's multiple ways. There's no right or wrong way in terms of doing it. So we did have a little hiccup in the stream. I think I lost internet there for a little bit. So we are back now. So I was going over some quick things. This stream will be, hopefully, I don't know what happens if the stream dies mid-stream. Hopefully this will all be up on YouTube for a replay. Because I went through a bunch of different stuff at the start, and then we just kind of been doing slow tangents since then. So now I got to get it back to where I was. Smooth, no QGrid, coverage. There we go. All right. So I've got about 15 minutes or so left. So I'm just going to noodle on this a little bit more. Once again, we have released the trial for ZBrush 2020. So if you guys are at home, guys and gals are at home, or you have any friends or anybody that is looking to kind of get into ZBrush, get into digital sculpting, wants to do, just has at home with a lot of time on their hands, definitely now's the time to kind of grab it and pick it up. All next week, we're going to start developer streams that are going to be focusing on learning with the trial version. So learning the basic principles of ZBrush. So think of it as like just basically logging in to ZBrush Live or Twitch here, and then going through and learning ZBrush. So if you're looking for something to do while you're at home currently with this avoiding the virus, definitely now is a good time to sit down and start learning ZBrush. And so we'll be doing developer streams all starting next week. I go next week on Wednesday and Friday at 11 a.m. LA time. And there'll be Paul will be going too, and then also Daisuke, our developer that's in Japan. So a lot of different ways to learn ZBrush. And ZBrush as well is also only really going to use your CPU. So it is not graphics card intensive. So that means if you basically have any computer, I've run it on a Core 2 Duo. I wouldn't recommend running it on a Core 2 Duo, but it does run on a Core 2 Duo. So you can basically run ZBrush as long as it has a Windows or Macintosh operating system. You can run ZBrush. It does not need a robust graphics card. And you can download the trial and try it out, and then we'll go through next week and show you guys some different things on getting into ZBrush. So the basics of ZBrush, we're calling it Z Classroom Live. So all sorts of fun things for that. And the main thing with anything, now that you're kind of doing with ZBrush is just have fun with it. Especially now. It's kind of a nice, relaxing, mindless adventure in creation. So I don't have really, like right now I'm just messing with stuff. So a lot of QMesh, a lot of ZModeler, looking for shapes. If I don't like it, just undo it. It's a good time sync too. Yeah, so question asking about the QGrid again. So just to show that you can apply it. So if you have it on and you don't want smoothing, you turn it off. And then you can have your QGrid on and you can apply this. And it will definitely apply. So this is the QGrid Geo. And you can see what QGrid is going to do. It's going to take all those edges and it's going to add edge loops around them. So it's basically going to add edge loops to every single edge. And the coverage of this and the grid length is going to determine how many of this gets applied. So you can always just apply it. You don't need to apply smoothing to it. You can always just add it and then apply it. And then now you can come in and clean that up if you want. So it's just a process. But in its dynamic form, it's easy to just toggle on and off. So if you like it or don't like it, you can just turn it on and off. But the smooth subdivision level 2 is going to do the same thing as dividing. So it's just coming up and it's giving you a preview of what the divide would look like. So it doesn't matter if you're in dynamic, if I get out of dynamic and divide, I'm going to get pretty much the same result between the two. And then your crease level is going to come into play for that. So you can see if I change my crease level here, I'm going to be able to see that on the fly. So I can use that to get that smoothed out. So Paul will be following up at 11 o'clock LA time today too. So shortly you will have, Paul will be streaming as well. And so if you have any questions or anything that I went over or didn't go over or anything like that, you can definitely hit up Paul too, and he'll be more than happy to answer those as well. Got about 9 minutes here, so if you have any other questions, now's the time. Because this project's just all over the place right now. I really did spend too much time today on the macro tangent. But I think it's a good one, because definitely if you have a lot of projects or anything inside of ZBrush that you do and it ends up having to do it more than once, definitely go and make a macro or a script. It's going to save you a lot of time. Oh, and I can leave you with, here, I'll show you what this process normally looks like in real time. Let's see. So this is, if you do a search for ZBrush Quick Red H Mech concept, this will kind of go through the process that I was kind of going through today. So using Shadowbox to generate the forms, and this will give you like a sketch option, right? So you can go through and just sketch out what you want, and then as you can see, as you use Shadowbox, you can move it off in space. So you're not constricted to where it is initially. And this will allow you to just come through and draw to create your different forms. And then after all these are drawn, come through and clean them up. And so we made a macro today to do this, to clean up those different forms. So it's just a time lapse of the process here. And then after those forms are cleaned up, went through and started using ZModeler to add some more interesting items to it. Just different ZModeler processes. And then the mesh itself ends up getting the dynamic and the QGrid options on it to kind of smooth out the processes. You can use that crease option with 45 degrees and now add the smoothing to it. And so basically it was just looking to generate stuff quick on the fly, conceptualize things, move things around. And then further on, if I would have got farther with my, my sculpting here today, using insert mesh brushes is the next stage. And this will add the roundness back in. So the main parts of the mesh we were creating originally, using the QGrid, using those are going to be your harsh shapes, or your more rectangular type forms. And then you can go back in and add insert meshes to add your roundness forms to it. And then further along, more detailing on those. And then eventually, there's a whole trick that I love involving surface noise. And this will overlay different details on your model through this surface noise process. And you basically do this offset. And it'll come through and make parts of your mesh look more crazy almost instantly. So there's a few streams that I've done this on. It's one of my favorites to kind of do. It gives really nice results very quickly after you have your base block out. So after these ZBrush basic ones, I'm going to get back into this and I'll try to finish this one up. I was hoping to get to this stage today, but as you see, that did not happen. But if you look for there's a time lapse on this that goes through the process of those steps. I would love ZBrush for VR. Look at these questions here quick. I would love it. So you can apply a crease just to an area as well, so you're not limited to where the creases are. So you have a few different options for that. The ZModeler brush, if you hover over an edge, there is a crease option. There's a crease action for ZModeler. And you have different targets here, so you can do edge loop complete, partial, poly loop. And basically this will allow you to crease just certain edges. And then you can see after those are creased, you can see staying the crease there. And then you can continue creasing or uncrease. And that will allow you to control where that crease is going to happen. Other ways you have are in the crease palette over here. So you can do it by degree. So if I want to do it by 45, I can type that in. It'll crease it by 45. I can do it by polygroups. So I can do it by this. So you can see this model as polygroups. If I click crease by polygroup, it's going to apply crease across all the borders of those polygroups. I can also do it by what's visible. So if I just have part of my mesh here, I can take crease there and it'll crease that outer edge. So you can see now I've just creased that area. If I want to crease this, crease that. So there's a bunch of different ways you can control your creases. So you're not just needing to crease everything globally, needing to crease everything all at once. You can go through and do that. The QGrid process is going to crease, it's going to add edge bumping, which is basically going to give you kind of that crease visual effect. So that is probably where the, what was mentioned was when I was doing this, you see it's going to add crease. The QGrid option is going to add basically a crease to every single edge. So that's the difference there. But if you don't have QGrid on, you can control the creasing wherever you want it to be. So if you have anything that's, got round surfaces, you probably want to control it manually rather than coming in and using the QGrid option. Is it possible to lock your sculpt and move the camera around freely? So your sculpt is kind of in the center of the camera. The camera is always looking at it, and basically there's one camera and you're moving the sculpt inside of it. I'm still explaining this really bad, but the camera is not really, it's not like your traditional camera where you're taking the camera and moving it around your model. You're kind of moving the model and the camera staying in one spot. So as you're rotating around, your camera's going to different angles, but you're pretty much moving your mesh. If you want to lock your mesh, or basically lock the camera, you can click this icon here, and this will now lock it. So now I won't be able to move anything, right? I'm not gonna be able to rotate around the model with that camera. So I can use anything I want here to manipulate my mesh, but it's locked the position of it. So if I move it out, now I can move it, say, this angle, I can lock it there, and now this is locked there. So it's kind of it's not like you have a traditional camera where you're moving the camera separately from your model. The camera's always gonna float and kind of look at your model. So you're moving the camera, but there's not really a locking of the model and then moving the camera separately. I'm doing a horrible job explaining this. Because you can rotate your model too. So if I just want to rotate the mesh, I can definitely do that. So I can come through and rotate the part, and then the camera's not going to move with it. So you have that option, which is you're moving the model, camera's locked. You can unlock the camera here and move it around. So switch on dynamic subdivisions. So the creasing is what I was using to kind of pin the edges. And you can export the creasing out with the FBX export up here. And this will actually export out the creasing. So if you export that FBX into Max, it'll use the open subdiv, and then it will also export that creasing out to Maya. One thing with the creasing inside of ZBrush, that it's going to be on or off. So you're not going to have a export creasing value that's going to be like 0.5, 0.2, 0.3. It's going to be a 1 and a 0. So if you can import in creasing through FBX, and you can also export it out through FBX, but it's always going to be on or off when it's inside of ZBrush. And the level here is just going to be separate from that. So the creasing here is on or off, and then if you have this crease level set here, this is going to kind of determine how rough or harsh that creasing is. So that's what this crease level slider does here. Yes, you can import, so ZBrush will import and export out pretty much all your standard formats. So you can export out OBJ, we have MA files for Maya, GoZ, which is our own. Then you have FBX, OBJ, PLY, STL, and WRL. The FBX is probably gonna be your best bet for Maya, so you can just export that out as an FBX. You can do that through the export option here. You can also go to the Z plugin tab, and there's a exporter option here too. And this will allow you to select which version of FBX you want, and it has different options for you that you can export the model out to Maya. There's also GoZ, and GoZ lives up here, and this will allow you to transport your model using GoZ files with a click from one application to another. So you can install GoZ for Maya, and then you can click this, and it'll take your model, send it to launch Maya, and then send your model over as well. So yes, you can definitely import and export out models from ZBrush to external applications. And for the learning stuff for that as well, as I mentioned earlier, we have a, let me get over to my, oh man, I don't know what I did with my, oh, I'm here. So we do have a trial for ZBrush 2020, and so next week we release the trial for ZBrush 2020. If you have anyone that's learning ZBrush, wants to learn ZBrush, know anyone that may be interested, they can download the trial. And then next week, we're going to start doing ZBrush Live, or Z Classroom Live sessions here on Twitch. And those will be about 2 hours each. And we'll try to go through the very basics of ZBrush. So literally, you just download the trial and what can I do to make something? And so we're going to try to get little projects together. Me, Paul, and Daisuke are going to go through and get these going for you guys all next week, so definitely tune in. And if you have anyone that is interested in learning ZBrush, it's a good time to do it, because we'll go through and show you the basics, how things work, and answer your questions as well. Once again, thank you guys for showing up for the stream. Paul will be coming on at 11 a.m. here. There's multiple ways to get into ZBrush. So we have ZBrush Core, which is our light version of the application, and we have subscription plans and also perpetual. So there's multiple ways there. You can get ZBrush Core for as low as $10 a month. And then we also have our professional version, which is what I was using today. And this one has monthly subscription plans as well that you can buy into, or you can buy a perpetual license. The perpetual license has never charged for an upgrade. So I bought ZBrush before I started working at Pixelogic for like, I think it was $295 or $395, and have never paid for an upgrade. So the software will pay for itself over time, and so that's one of those great things that all the upgrades have been free and they just keep getting better. So definitely look into those options. The free trial you can download. There's no reason not to. There's also a trial of the Keyshot bridge as well, so you can use that to send models from ZBrush to Keyshot. You can download the trial of Keyshot, download the trial of the bridge, and you can get the whole thing going and start learning how to digital sculpt while you guys are at home. So I hope this crazy virus thing doesn't last too long. But we will be here with you guys through it. And so starting next week, we're going to be starting doing pretty much daily developer streams, focusing on learning ZBrush and using the trial to kind of like start from scratch. Yes, the core version will work within the professional version. So you will not be able to go from the professional version to the core version, but core to core and then core to full version. And you can download the download core and try it out too if you want. But yes, they do upgrade. And there is an upgrade plan from the core version to the professional version as well. So multiple options. All right, you guys and gals, thank you all for tuning in. And Paul will be coming on next at 11 a.m. Pacific time here. So tune in for his stream as well. If you have any questions on that stuff, he is also good to answer. And we had an initial one at the start about rendering. That's one for Paul. Thank you guys. Take care. Stay safe.